He purchased the unwanted daughter no one else would take, yet the moment the Apache laid eyes on her, he did the one thing he had sworn he never would. What Ivy Blake didn't know was that the warrior had demanded a single condition: the right to return her if her face truly frightened the children. And what neither of them could have imagined was that one violent storm, one desperate night inside a rocky cave would undo everything they believed to be true. Because when the sack finally slipped away, the man standing before her saw something that pushed him to cross a line he'd never crossed before, an act reckless enough to cost him his standing, dangerous enough to expose secrets buried for 7 long years, and powerful enough to prove that the cruelest prisons are often the ones we're taught to build inside our own minds. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. In the Arizona Territory, 1866, a young woman was about to be traded like worthless cargo. Ivy Blake never imagined that single day would fracture her life beyond repair. She was 10 years old when her world collapsed for the first time. She had been standing at her mother's vanity, gazing at her reflection while fastening the pearl necklace her mama once promised would be hers someday. Her pale blonde hair, freshly washed and carefully brushed by the housekeeper, glimmered in the afternoon light spilling through the window. She hummed softly one of the lullabies her mother used to sing. That was when Hester Vaughn appeared in the doorway. "What do you think you're doing?" her stepmother demanded, her voice sharp as frost. "I was just looking," Ivy whispered, fumbling as she removed the necklace. Hester crossed the room in 3 quick strides and tore the pearls from Ivy's hands. "You have no right to touch those. No right to stand there, admiring yourself like some spoiled little princess. Your mother is dead." She seized Ivy's chin, forcing her toward the mirror. "Look at yourself. Really look. Do you see what I see?" Ivy stared back at the glass. She saw a girl with her mother's fair hair and clear blue eyes, a child beginning to lose her softness, already showing the early signs of the woman she would become. "I see myself." "You see a problem," Hester said coldly. "You're becoming vain, obsessed with your looks. It's disgusting, and it ends now." 2 days later, Hester placed a rough burlap sack into Ivy's hands. "From now on, you'll wear this whenever visitors come. Your face unsettles people." She lowered her voice, almost pleased. "No one says it out loud, they're too polite. But they whisper, 'Poor Amos Blake,' they say. 'Cursed with such an unfortunate-looking child.' This sack spares them from having to look at you." She smiled thinly. "It's an act of kindness, really." Ivy's father sat in his study just down the hall. He heard every word. He said nothing. That was the day Ivy learned that the people meant to protect you are sometimes the ones who break you beyond repair. Jalen had brokered many deals in his 31 years, but never one like this. He had ridden to the Blake Ranch to purchase horses. 20 head, strong, steady, and well-trained. Perfect stock for the coming autumn hunts. Amos Blake owned the finest horses in the territory. Everyone knew that. The negotiation moved quickly. Too quickly. That should have been Jalen's first warning. They stood inside the rancher's study, papers spread across the desk. The contract nearly finished when Amos cleared his throat, the way men do when they're about to ask for something they know they shouldn't. "There's another offer," Amos said, avoiding Jalen's eyes. Jalen waited in silence. He'd learned long ago that quiet made men reveal more than questions ever could. "My daughter," Amos continued, gesturing vaguely toward the back of the house. "She's 17, educated, speaks proper English. I don't need a teacher," Jalen replied evenly. "I'll give her to you for free," Amos blurted. "Just take her." Jalen studied him. Sweat clung to Amos's brow despite the cool autumn air. His hand shook as he poured another glass of whiskey. This wasn't generosity. This was desperation. "Why are you so eager to be rid of your own daughter?" Jalen asked. Amos drained his drink. "She's difficult, refuses marriage, drives my wife insane, and truth be told, she isn't pleasant to look at." He scoffed. "She wears a sack over her head. Her face disturbs people." Jalen felt his jaw tighten. He'd witnessed cruelty before, but a father selling his own child, like a crippled animal, was something else entirely. "I don't want a white woman in my village." "I understand," Amos said quickly. "But think about it. Your chief sent you to find ways for your people to survive this changing world, didn't he? English is everywhere now. Your children need it." He leaned forward. "And I'm offering you someone fluent who can teach them." Jalen hated that the man wasn't wrong. Jalen hated how right the man was. Tenoch had tasked him with finding ways to help their people survive the changes sweeping across the land, and whether they liked it or not, the world was shifting fast. If the next generation didn't speak the white man's language, they'd be left behind, unable to navigate the tides that were coming. "If she's really as unpleasant as you claim," Jalen said slowly, "if the children fear her, I'll return her." Amos Blake's face lit up with desperation, thinly veiled as relief. "You have my word 1 month. If she doesn't work out, you bring her back. No questions asked, no strings, no charge." Jalen glanced at the contract lying on the table. The price for the horses was fair, better than fair, and if taking this girl secured the deal. "Fine," he muttered against his better judgment. "But if she causes trouble, I bring her straight back." Of course." Of course, Amos nearly stumbled over himself, rushing to the door. "Hester, bring Ivy down." Jalen heard footsteps from the staircase. The first to appear was a woman, with beauty as sharp as broken glass eyes, calculating, and a smile that didn't dare touch her lips. The stepmother. Then came the girl, and Jalen forgot to breathe, not from shock, but from something darker. The girl, Ivy Blake, wore a burlap sack over her head, loosely tied at the neck. Her frame was frail, almost skeletal. The dress she wore was stained and torn, hanging from her like rags. Even from across the room, the sour smell of neglect reached him. "This is Ivy," Amos said without glancing at her. "She'll go with you and teach English to the children. Do you understand, Ivy?" A small muffled voice came from under the sack. "Yes, sir." "Good. Gather your belongings." "She has none," Hester said with a satisfied smirk. "Nothing worth taking." Jalen watched the exchange, his disgust mounting. The girl didn't move, didn't speak. She simply stood there, hands clasped in front, her chin lowered, like someone who'd been taught that silence was safety, and stillness meant survival. "Then we leave now," Jalen said sharply. He needed to get away from this house. He led Ivy outside to where his horse stood waiting. She followed with careful, halting steps, blind more than likely under that sack. Jalen helped her mount behind him. Her thin hands trembled as they wrapped around his waist. As they rode into the open land, Jalen cast one last glance over his shoulder. There stood Hester, framed in the upstairs window, her smile cold and triumphant, like she'd just rid herself of a cursed possession. Not a single word came from the girl behind him. For the first hour of the ride, Ivy didn't make a sound, but Jalen could feel her trembling. Whether from cold or fear, he couldn't say. He tried to draw her out. "What's your full name?" A pause. "Ivy Blake." "You 17? "Yes." "Can you read?" "Write, yes." "Do you want to teach? Or is this your father's idea?" Another long silence. "I'll do whatever I'm told." Jalen frowned. That wasn't an answer. That was survival talk from someone who'd learned opinions only got you hurt. They rode in silence until the clouds thickened and darkened. Jalen had seen the storm building for miles, but it hit faster than he expected. The trail turned to slush as rain slammed the earth like fury unbottled. "There's a cave up ahead," Jalen shouted above the thunder. "We'll wait it out there." He guided the horse toward a rock face he knew well. The shelter was shallow but dry, used for years by hunters like him. He swung down and helped Ivy off the horse, then quickly secured the animal under cover before returning to the entrance. She hadn't moved. Rain poured off the soaked sack over her head. Her clothes clung to her frame, soaked through. She was shaking hard. "Come inside," Jalen called, pulling dry firewood from a pile tucked under the ledge. "I'll get a fire going." Within minutes, the cave glowed with the crackle of flames. Warmth began to chase away the wet chill. But Ivy didn't move. She stood, frozen arms wrapped around herself, shivering so violently her teeth clattered. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Jalen said firmly. She shook her head, he thought. It was hard to tell with the sack still clinging to her scalp. "You'll catch your death like this. I have a blanket in my pack. Wrap yourself up in it." "I can't," she whispered, barely audible over the roar of rain. "Why not, the sack?" she murmured. "I can't take it off." Jalen stared at her. "You're soaked through. Your clothes are plastered to your skin. That sack is dripping, girl. You're going to freeze." "Still, I can't." Panic rose in her voice, now raw and cracking. "People can't see my face," she said. It's too awful. They get scared," she added, her breath coming in short bursts. Jalen kept his voice steady, fighting against the ache in his chest. "We're alone, Ivy. In the middle of nowhere. Just you and me in this cave. You'll be scared too. I've faced wolves, mountain lions, even men with guns pointed at my chest," he said gently. "Takes more than a face to rattle me." "You don't get it," she choked out, voice thick with tears. "My stepmother, Hester, she said I was monstrous, hideous. That's why I wear this thing, so people don't have to look at me." A cold, heavy knot settled in Jalen's gut. He'd sensed something was wrong in that house, but this was cruelty on a different level. They'd convinced this girl her face was a curse, a danger. "Ivy," he said softly, crouching by the fire, "you'll get sick if you stay in those wet clothes. I promise I won't flinch. I won't run. I won't hurt you. All I ask is you get warm. Please, just take off the soaked clothes." For a moment there was only the sound of wind and fire. Then, with hands that trembled as though they were lifting boulders, Ivy reached for the tie at her neck. She pulled the sack loose. It dropped, and Jalen forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful. Not just in the way of pretty faces, but in a way that made something ache behind his ribs. Her hair, though damp and tangled, shimmered like sunlit wheat. Her face delicate, pale, with high cheekbones, and a straight little nose, looked nothing like what he'd been warned about. But it was her eyes that held him still. Deep blue like polished sapphires, frightened, unsure, and full of tears. "Don't look at me," she whispered, covering her face with shaking hands. "Please, don't look." "Ivy," his voice caught deeper than he intended. "You're not ugly." She shook her head hard. "You're just being kind." "No, I'm being honest. Hester lied to you. She wouldn't. She told me every day. Every single day she said I was hideous, that I'd scare children, that I should be grateful for the sack. She lied." Jalen said firmer now, lied straight through her teeth. "Look at me, Ivy." Slowly, painfully, she lowered her hands. Her gaze stayed downcast. "You're not ugly," he said again. You're beautiful. Whoever told you otherwise, either they couldn't see straight, or they wanted to hurt you." Ivy's eyes finally met his. She searched his face like she expected to find a smirk or a flinch. But there was nothing but truth. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would she lie?" Jalen's voice dropped. "Because people like her destroy what they envy." "Now please," he added gently, "get warm before you freeze." Still stunned, Ivy began removing her wet outer layers like a sleepwalker. She moved mechanically, wordless, and wrapped herself in the blanket he'd laid out. Then she sat near the fire, staring into the flames like her entire world had just been set aflame. And maybe it had. Jalen kept busy with the camp, giving her space, but his thoughts raced. He'd agreed to take her back if things didn't work out. He'd expected someone plain, maybe even disfigured. What he found was a girl who'd survived years of mental torment, taught to hate her own reflection, forced to live behind a veil of shame. But looking at her now, hair clinging to her shoulders, blue eyes and reflecting firelight, Jalen knew. He wasn't taking her back, not in a month, not ever. This girl, this broken, brave girl, was coming home with him, and he was going to show her the truth that had been buried under all that pain. Even if it meant going against Tenoch, even if it meant risking his place in the tribe, even if it meant admitting something dangerous. He was falling for her. A white girl he barely knew, a girl he'd sworn he would never care for. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cave something new had begun. Ivy stared at the sack in her hands, dripping and limp. "I should put it back on," she said softly. "No," Jalen replied. She looked up, confused. "You don't need it anymore," he said. "You never did. But when we reach your village, the children, they won't fear you," he said, calm and sure. "I give you my word." She bit her lip. A part of her clearly wanted to believe, but old scars ran deep. They spent the rest of the night waiting out the storm. Ivy curled near the fire, worn out from crying and cold. Eventually she slept. Jalen stayed awake, tending the fire, trying to grasp what had just upended his well-ordered life. He'd come for horses. Instead, he'd found something far more complicated and far more precious. By dawn, the storm had passed. The desert was washed clean, glowing under a pale sun. Jalen helped Ivy mount the horse. Her hand reached instinctively for the sack. "Don't," he said, gently. But she hesitated. "Trust me," he said. "Please." After a pause, she gave a tiny nod. She left the sack behind. She left the sack behind in the cave. They rode for 2 more hours through a quiet desert. Ivy's head bowed low, trying to shield her face behind the curtain of her tangled blonde hair. Each time the wind swept it aside, she flinched, bracing for disgust, expecting Jalen to pull away. He never did. When they finally crested the ridge overlooking the Apache settlement, Ivy's breath caught in her throat. It was stunning. Dozens of earthen lodges nestled into a quiet valley, thin spirals of smoke curling from chimneys, kids splashing by a stream, and horses lazily grazing behind woven fences. It looked like something out of a dream, like peace, like safety, like something she'd never had. But as they rode deeper into the village, Ivy felt the stares. Women paused mid-task. Men looked up from sharpening tools or hanging pelts. Children stopped playing, fingers pointing. "They're staring," Ivy murmured, curling into herself. "Because you're new," Jalen said. "Because you're white, not because of your face." He rode straight to the largest dwelling in the center. A man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered silver, threading through his black hair. His presence was commanding. This had to be Tenoch the chief. He spoke swiftly in Apache, his tone curious, but not hostile. Jalen answered with calm gestures, briefly indicating Ivy. She couldn't make out a single word, but she knew tension when she felt it. Tenoch was skeptical, maybe even annoyed. Finally, the chief turned toward her and spoke in accented but firm English. "Jalen says you teach English to children. That true?" "Yes, sir," Ivy said quietly. "I can read and write. I've been well educated. Then why do you look so frightened?" The question hit her like a slap. No one had ever asked her that. "I'm not used to people seeing my face," she admitted. He studied her closely. "And why is that?" "My stepmother said it was unpleasant to look at, that I should hide it." Tenoch stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he examined her face with the cool detachment of someone judging livestock. "Your stepmother was blind, or jealous." He grunted. "You are a pretty girl. Nothing wrong with your face. Something inside Ivy cracked a wall she'd carried so long it felt like bone. "You may stay," Tenoch declared. "Teach the children. If you are good, you belong here. If not, you go back." He turned to Jalen and said something sharp in Apache. Jalen didn't flinch, just stared back evenly. After a pause, Tenoch sighed, shook his head, and walked off without another word. "What did he say?" Ivy asked. "He reminded me I was supposed to ask before bringing you." Jalen admitted. "I didn't." "Are you in trouble?" "Probably," he said with a crooked smile. "But I figure he'll forgive me, once he sees how well you teach." An older woman approached, maybe 60, weathered, but warm-eyed, her movements full of strength. She spoke softly to Jalen, then turned toward Ivy with open curiosity. "This is my mother," Jalen said. "Her name's Senna. She'll help you settle in." Senna took Ivy's arm gently and led her to a smaller lodge. Inside was a sunken fire pit, fur bedding, some clay pots, and basic cookware. "You need bath," Senna said in careful English. "Very dirty, very smelly." Ivy flushed but didn't protest. She couldn't argue with the truth. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a proper bath. Senna warmed water, handed her real soap, gentle, sweet smelling, and laid out clean clothes. She also offered a small pouch of powder, gesturing toward Ivy's head. "For bugs," she said simply. "Kills lice." The shame stung, but Senna's kindness dulled the blade. She wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact, like cleaning a wound. It took 3 washings before Senna was satisfied. When Ivy sat by the fire afterward, her skin scrubbed pink and her hair beginning to dry, she hardly recognized herself. Her skin was pale, not gray. Her hair, now golden and soft, shone in the firelight. "Better," Senna said, nodding. "Now eat. You too skinny." The days that followed moved in rhythm. Mornings were spent learning Apache. Life grinding corn, shaping clay, tending fire. In the afternoons, Ivy gathered the children beneath a large cottonwood where she taught them English. Numbers, colors, simple words. They were quick learners, and every time she tried to speak Apache, they giggled sweet, bright laughter that didn't hurt. And every day without fail, Jalen would find a reason to come by, sometimes with supplies, sometimes just to watch, but always with something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Sometimes he brought her a polished stone from the river, other times a fistful of wildflowers. Once a woven blanket his mother had made just in case. Their conversations wandered from the children's lessons to nothing in particular, and Ivy found herself watching the ridgeline, waiting for Jalen's return from patrols or hunting trips. One quiet afternoon, the lessons had ended early. The kids had scattered toward the stream, their giggles echoing across the valley. Ivy stood alone beneath the cottonwood, fingering a smooth river rock a little girl had slipped into her hand. Without thinking, she walked down to the water. The stream ran quiet and still, glass clear. For years, Ivy had avoided her reflection. Hester had shattered every mirror in her room, warned her that even her own eyes shouldn't have to see her face. But now, curiosity tugged at her. She knelt beside the water, heart pounding. Slowly she leaned over and looked. A girl stared back at her. No, not a stranger. Herself. But someone she'd never been allowed to meet. Her hair, once matted and hidden, now fell in soft golden waves thanks to Senna's gentle combing. Her skin, once smudged with filth, was pale and clean. And her eyes, those blue eyes Hester had called pig-like, were bright and full of depth. She was beautiful. Ivy gasped and turned. Jalen stood a few paces away, his expression unreadable but gentle. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said softly. "I saw you looking, and hoped you were seeing what I see." Her voice barely rose above the breeze. "And what do you see?" He stepped closer. "I see someone who survived 7 years of being told she was less than nothing. And somehow she still treats the world with kindness. He paused. I see someone who used to fear children and now plays with them like they're her own. Someone who's learning to laugh again. Someone strong and rare. Tears spilled down Ivy's cheeks before she could stop them. I spent so long believing I was a monster. I forgot what it felt like to be seen. He nodded gently. That's because now you're finally seeing the truth. Not the poison Hester fed you, she sniffed. Today, one of the girls, Yanni, she touched my cheek and told me I was pretty. I didn't believe her. I thought she was just being sweet. She wasn't. Jalen said, "Children don't lie about things like that." Ivy looked down at her reflection, then back up at him. "Thank you for bringing me here, for showing me I was wrong." "You weren't wrong," he said quietly. "You were lied to. There's a difference." That night, for the first time in 7 long years, Ivy slept without dreaming of her own face in broken glass. No jagged shards. No nightmares. 2 months passed, and Ivy Blake transformed. Regular meals brought life back to her slender frame. Clean skin and brushed hair revealed the beauty she'd been forced to hide. But it wasn't just the outside that changed. She laughed more now, played with the children, sometimes sang while working with Senna, grinding corn or mending clothes. The girl who'd arrived wearing a sack over her head had started to fade, and in her place, someone vibrant was blooming. One evening, she sat by the river, watching the sunset paint the sky with fire. Footsteps approached behind her. "Mind if I join you?" Jalen asked. She smiled softly and nodded. He sat beside her in silence for a moment before speaking. "Ivy, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you believe them?" he asked. "Your father, your stepmother. Why did you believe you were ugly?" She was quiet for so long, he thought she might not answer. Then when someone tells you something every day from the time you're 10, you start to believe it, especially when that someone's supposed to love you. "What happened when you were 10? "I started looking like my mother," she said quietly. "Hester married my father when I was 5. For a while she ignored me. But when I turned 8 or 9, something changed. I began to resemble the woman in the portraits he kept." "Your mother was beautiful," Ivy whispered. "And Hester hated it. She found fault in everything. My hair, my nose, my smile. Then came the sack. She said it was for my protection, said people were horrified by me. And she was sparing me the pain of their cruelty. And your father just let it happen." Ivy let out a bitter laugh. "He was a coward. Easier to hand me over than to stand up to her." Jalen turned to her, gently lifting her chin. "You know now, don't you? You know you're beautiful." Her eyes glistened. "I'm learning to believe it. When you look at me, when the children laugh with me, when your mother looks at me like I belong, I don't feel like a monster anymore. You only see me," Ivy murmured, "because that's all there is to see." Jalen met her gaze. "No. I see a kind, beautiful, and brave woman. I'm not brave." He shook his head. "You survived 7 years of psychological abuse. You're learning a new language, in a world you were never meant to enter. Every day you wake up and choose hope over fear. That is bravery." Ivy looked at him, really looked, without the weight of shame or fear, for once clouding her vision. And what she saw in his eyes made her breath hitch. "Jalen," she whispered, "why did you really bring me here? It wasn't just about teaching. The children, was it?" He hesitated for a beat, then gave her the truth. "At first, yeah. But after that storm, after the cave, after seeing your face and hearing what they did to you, I knew I couldn't send you back. Not to those people, not to that life. But you could have found me another place," she said. "A white family. Someone in town who needed help. I didn't want to find you another place, he cut in. I wanted you here, with me. The words hung between them raw and real. Ivy, he said gently, I know this isn't simple. I'm Apache, you're white. There are 100 reasons this shouldn't work. But I'm falling in love with you. He swallowed hard. Maybe I already have. And if you feel even a piece of what I'm feeling. She kissed him. It wasn't polished or practiced. It was clumsy and soft and real. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Ivy whispered with a smile blooming across her lips. Is that answer enough? Jalen wrapped his arms around her. Yeah, he said quietly. That's more than enough. They sat together on the riverbank, watching the sunset melt into the water. Two souls from different worlds finding shelter in each other. A love built not on fantasy, but truth. Something solid. Something earned. But peace is never permanent when ghosts from the past still ride. A week later, riders appeared on the ridge. Ivy was mid-lesson beneath the cottonwood when a warning cry rang out. She looked up, heart freezing. 3 riders approached fast, 2 men in dust-covered coats, 1 woman dressed in black. Ivy's stomach turned to stone. She knew that woman. Hester Vaughn had come to reclaim what she believed was hers. But now, Ivy saw her clearly for the first time. The woman who had haunted her for 7 years wasn't a demon after all. Just a bitter, ordinary woman. Sharp-featured. Pretty in a cold, forgettable way. Certainly not worth the hell she had inflicted. The riders were led straight to Tenoch's lodge. A crowd began to gather. Ivy barely had time to think before Jalen appeared at her side. Go inside, he said low and steady. No, she replied. Her voice was calm, sure. I need to face them. By the time they reached the gathering, the visitors were already dismounting. There stood Hester, flanked by a man Ivy didn't recognize, his tin badge glinting under the sun, and Captain Dorian Webb in full cavalry uniform. Hester's gaze swept the crowd. When her eyes landed on Ivy, her expression faltered, shocked. That can't be her, she muttered to her companions. That girl is pretty. Ivy was hideous. Jalen stiffened beside her, but Ivy touched his arm lightly. This is my fight. She stepped forward. Hello, Hester. Hester blinked, but quickly painted a mask of false concern. Ivy. Thank heavens. Your father and I have been worried sick. We feared these people had... She paused, hand to her chest, playing the scene like a rehearsed tragedy. But what happened to you? You look so... different. I'm clean, Ivy said simply. Turns out that's all it took. Captain Webb stepped forward. Miss Blake, I've been sent by territorial authorities. Your father filed a report claiming you were taken against your will. I wasn't taken, Ivy replied. I was sold, traded, for horses. My father made the deal himself. Sold the sheriff, a man whose badge read Harlan Crow, shifted uncomfortably. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth, Ivy said. He wanted rid of me, and I was glad to go. She's been brainwashed, Hester snapped. Look at her. Clearly she's been influenced. Ivy, sweetheart, just say the word. Tell them you want to come home. I am home, Ivy said. Color rose in Hester's cheeks. This is not your home. You're not my family. I raised you, Hester hissed. After your mother died, you broke me, Ivy said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. You tormented me for years, every single day, for 7 years. The crowd fell still. Not even the wind dared to speak. Sheriff Harlan Crow cleared his throat. Miss Blake, those are serious accusations. Perhaps we should step inside and speak in private. No. Ivy stepped forward, her voice clear as a rifle crack. This needs to be heard. All of it. She turned to face the crowd. Apache families and settlers alike gathered in uneasy silence outside Tenoch's lodge. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't falter. From the time I was 10 years old, Hester Vaughn told me I was ugly. She said my face was so disturbing, so awful that others would be frightened to look at me. She gave me a burlap sack and said it was for everyone's protection. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She forbade me from bathing, said soap was wasted on me. She let lice crawl through my hair and never once treated it. She made me wear the same filthy clothes for weeks. And every single day she reminded me I was monstrous, unlovable, that I should be grateful she let me exist at all. Hester shrieked, red-faced. She was difficult. She needed discipline. I was a child. Ivy's voice rose, ringing through the clearing. I was a 10-year-old girl whose mother had just died. And you made me believe I didn't deserve to be seen. You smashed every mirror in my room so I couldn't even look at myself. You convinced me that I was a monster. And why would I do that? Hester demanded. Because I was starting to look like my mother. Ivy said, voice sharp as a blade, and you couldn't stand the thought that I might grow up to be prettier than you. The truth settled like a thunderclap. All eyes shifted between the girl, radiant, strong, standing tall, and the woman beside her, desperate, unraveling. Sheriff Crow shifted uncomfortably, then cleared his throat again. Miss Blake is still a minor, 17 years old. By law, she must remain under a guardian's supervision until she turns 18. When is your birthday? Captain Dorian Webb asked. In 2 months, Ivy replied. Then here's my ruling, the sheriff said. Until then, you'll be placed in neutral custody at the territorial orphanage. On your birthday, you'll be free to choose your future. No, Jalen said, firmly stepping up beside Ivy. She stays here. She's a minor, Sheriff Crow replied. That's the law. Tenok stepped forward then. His voice was slow but deliberate. This girl teaches our children. She is part of our circle. We will keep her safe until her day comes. Then she chooses. With all due respect, Chief Crow said carefully, I can't leave a white girl in an Apache village. Why not? Tenoch's voice turned to steel. You think we will harm her? Look at her. She is fed. She is clean. She is loved. More than she ever was among her own. Crow looked back at Ivy, and this time really looked. He saw how she stood near Jalen. Saw the Apache women, positioned protectively around her. Saw how the children clung to her skirts like she was their own. He sighed. 2 months, he said finally. She stays at the orphanage for 2 months. Then she's free to choose. That's my final word. That's not fair, Hester protested. Life rarely is, ma'am. The sheriff tipped his hat toward her. Miss Blake, pack your things. You leave in an hour. Tears burned Ivy's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not now. Not here. She'd cried enough. She turned to Jalen. I'll come back, she whispered. I swear it. I know you will, he said. He didn't care who was watching. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. 2 months, he murmured. I'll be right here. As they led her away, Ivy looked back at the village that had become her world. At the children who had once feared her and now called her teacher. At the woman who had treated her like a daughter. And at the man who had shown her what love without shame looked like. 2 months. She'd survived 7 years. She could survive 2 more. The territorial orphanage sat like a gravestone at the edge of a dust-choked town. Gray walls, heavy doors. The smell of boiled cabbage and carbolic soap hit her the moment she stepped inside. They gave her a room on the 2nd floor, bare, clean, and cold. A narrow cot, a single wooden chair, a small window overlooking the street. The matron stood in the doorway, arms folded tight. Her name was Edith Prim, and she looked Ivy over like a problem to solve. You're the girl from the Apache village. Yes, ma'am. 17. Prim muttered. Old enough to know better than to run off with savages. Ivy bit her tongue. 2 months, she reminded herself. Just 2 months. Time slowed to a crawl. Days passed like weeks. She helped teach the younger orphans, letters, numbers, anything to stay sane. But her heart stayed back in the desert, under cottonwood trees and painted skies. Waiting. Ivy kept her head down and did what was asked, cleaning, cooking, keeping to herself. Each night she marked another day off the calendar, scratched into her Bible, counting down the days to her freedom. 3 weeks into her stay, a new girl arrived. She was no older than 8, thin with tangled dark hair and eyes too haunted for her age. Ivy recognized that look instantly. Fear, confusion, silence, so deep it ached. The girl Fern was assigned to a room with 3 others, but she didn't talk, didn't eat much. She spent most of her time curled in corners like she was trying to disappear. One afternoon, Ivy found her behind the woodshed near the garden knees, pulled to her chest, arms tight around herself. "Hey there," Ivy said softly, settling nearby without crowding her. "I'm Ivy. You're Fern, right?" No response, but the girl's eyes darted toward her for the briefest second. "I know what it's like to be scared," Ivy continued gently. "To feel like you don't belong anywhere. To think something must be wrong with you." This time Fern's gaze lifted and held. There was desperation in those little eyes. The kind that doesn't come from hunger, it comes from being told, "You don't matter." "When I was 10, Ivy said someone told me I was too ugly to look at. They made me wear a sack over my head. For 7 years. Fern's lips parted. Shock. Confusion. "Every day they told me I was a monster," Ivy whispered. "And for a long time I believed them." She paused, then added, "But none of it was true. That person was cruel and jealous and wanted to break me. And for a while, they did." Fern finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "What changed? I met people who told me the truth," Ivy said. "People who showed me I wasn't what she said I was. People who loved me when I didn't think I deserved it." She smiled softly. "And now I know." That voice was wrong. So wrong. Tears ran down Fern's cheeks. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silent heartbreak spilling out. "Whatever someone told you," Ivy said quietly, "whatever they made you believe, you're not broken. You're just hurting. And hurt can heal." Fern suddenly flung herself into Ivy's arms, sobbing into her chest. Ivy wrapped her tight and held her, stroking her messy hair and whispering comfort just as Senna once did for her. She was passing it forward now, kindness like a torch lit in the dark. 3 weeks later, Ivy was hanging laundry when Edith Prim called out from the porch. "You have a visitor." She stepped inside the parlor, and her breath caught. Hester Vaughn sat primly on the settee, dressed to impress with lace gloves and a hat pinned just so. Her face was composed in an expression of forced concern. "Hello, Ivy." Ivy didn't respond. "I came to explain," Hester began. "About everything. You have to understand. I was only trying to protect you." "Protect me," Ivy echoed flatly. "By convincing me I was too revolting to be seen. You were becoming vain." Hester snapped her mask, cracking just slightly. "Always looking in mirrors, obsessed with your looks. I had to teach you humility. I was 10. You were becoming a problem. And in that moment, Ivy saw her stepmother for exactly what she was: not a guardian, not a protector, but a saboteur." "You didn't protect me," Ivy said. "You destroyed me, piece by piece. What did I ever do to make you hate me?" For the first time, something like honesty flickered in Hester's face. "You had everything," she said bitterly. "A father who adored you. Beauty that was only going to grow. Money. Inheritance. I had to work for every scrap I ever got, and you were born into it like it was owed." "So yes," she said coldly, "I hated you, and I won't apologize for trying to take what should have been mine." Something shifted inside Ivy. It wasn't forgiveness, she'd never offer that. But it was clarity. Hester Vaughn was small, petty, cruel, and none of that had anything to do with Ivy. "You failed," Ivy said softly. I'm free now, and in 6 weeks I'll be free in the eyes of the law, too. You'll never touch me again. Hester's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. A week later, Sheriff Harlan Crow returned. I'm afraid there's been a complication, he said grimly. Ivy's stomach dropped. What kind of complication? Your stepmother filed a petition. She's claiming you're mentally unstable and unfit for legal independence. She's requesting a doctor examine you, and if found unstable, the court can extend her guardianship. That's insane. Maybe. But the law says we have to take her petition seriously. A doctor's coming tomorrow. The next morning, right on schedule, the doctor arrived. A thin man with steel-rimmed glasses and eyes like wet stone. He asked question after question, always circling back to her time with the Apache. Did they pressure you to stay? Did they give you gifts? Did anyone touch you inappropriately? Ivy kept her answers calm, rational, focused. But she could see it in his face. The nods, the scribbles. He wasn't looking for truth, he was looking to confirm suspicion. And Ivy knew this fight wasn't over yet. 2 days later, Sheriff Harlan Crow gave her the news. The doctor's recommendation is official, he said grimly. They've approved your transfer to a care facility. Ivy blinked. For what exactly? Being clean, learning to smile again. I'm sorry, Miss Blake. The petition passed. You're to be relocated to the Women's Asylum in Silver City the day after tomorrow. The words hit like a bullet to the chest. The asylum. She'd heard the stories, women locked away for being inconvenient, forgotten by the world. Some never walked back out again. That night, Ivy sat on her narrow cot, trying to hold back the panic. Run maybe, run. But where Jalen's village was 3 days away on foot, and she'd never make it before they caught her. She was still gripping the window ledge, trying to think when a soft tap came at the glass. She turned. There he was. Jalen crouched on the rooftop like a ghost out of the dark, one finger pressed to his lips. Her breath caught in her throat. She flung open the window, whispering, "What are you doing here?" "Saving you," he said with a crooked grin. Again. "They moved my date," she whispered. "They're sending me to an asylum." Jalen's smile vanished. "Then we ride. Tonight." "But I'm still 17. 17 years and 10 months, he interrupted. "Close enough. Tenoch says you've served your time. And so do I." Without another word, Ivy grabbed her few belongings and climbed out the window. Jalen helped her down into the alley where 2 horses waited in the shadows. They rode through the night under stars that watched in silence. And by the time the sun painted the sky pink, the town was nothing but a memory behind them. "What about the law?" Ivy asked as they stopped to water the horses. "What about it?" Jalen said, swinging off his saddle. "You'll be 18 in 3 weeks. If they come, they'll have to deal with both of us." She leaned into him. "Hester's going to be furious." "Good," he replied. "She should be." They reached the village just as twilight draped the valley in gold. The children were the first to spot them. Running, laughing, calling her name like she was a story come true. Senna came rushing from her lodge, tears streaking her face. Even Tenoch allowed a rare smile to break his solemn features. That night, as Ivy sat before the fire surrounded by those who had become her family, Jalen reached over and took her hand. 3 weeks, he said softly. "Then you'll be free. For real this time." He paused. "And when that day comes, I'd like to ask you something." She turned toward him. "What, marry me?" The tears that came this time were warm, happy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely, yes." He kissed her, and the village erupted in cheers. Laughter and firelight danced in her heart. For the first time in her life, Ivy Blake felt like she belonged. But freedom always comes with a price. And Hester Vaughn wasn't the kind to admit defeat, not with 3 weeks left to destroy everything. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Ivy woke to the distant thunder of hooves. Too many to be coincidence. She stepped outside barefoot and blinking against the light, only to see a column of mounted soldiers pouring into the village led by Captain Dorian Webb. Behind them rolled a wagon carrying 3 passengers, Sheriff Harlan Crow, a woman she didn't recognize, and Hester Vaughn. Tennock stepped out to meet them, his face carved from stone. "You come in peace, Captain." "We come with a warrant," Webb said, uneasy. "For Ivy Blake." "On what charge?" Jalen asked, already at Ivy's side. "Theft," the unfamiliar woman declared, standing in the wagon. "I'm Martha Bell, sister to Amos Blake. I've been made executor of his estate. He passed away 2 weeks ago." The ground shifted beneath Ivy's feet. Her father was dead. He left everything to Ivy. Martha continued, "But Mrs. Hester Vaughn has accused her of stealing valuables before leaving cash and jewelry totaling over $500. "That's a lie," Ivy said. "Is it?" Hester stepped forward, wearing grief like a costume. "Ivy, I understand you're angry, but theft is a serious offense. Just return the items and we can put this behind us." "I left with nothing but the clothes on my back," Ivy replied. "You know that." "She's lying," Hester said sharply, turning to the soldiers. "She's been living with savages for months. You can't trust a word she says." Sheriff Crow dismounted with a heavy sigh. "Miss Blake, I'm going to need you to come with us. If you're innocent, the court will decide. But until then—" "No," Ivy said, lifting her chin. And just like that, the crowd went still. Jalen stepped forward, placing himself between Ivy and the law. "She's not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Son, Sheriff Harlan Crow warned, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Nobody wants blood spilled." "Neither do I," Jalen replied, "which is why everyone here needs to listen to her." Unexpectedly, Martha Bell, Amos Blake's sister, raised her hand. "I'd like to hear her out," she said calmly. "I never trusted Hester Vaughn, and frankly, I've got questions about my brother's death." Hester's face went white. "It was natural," she said quickly. "Heart failure. Sudden. After just 1 year of marriage." Martha's voice sharpened. "How convenient. Are you accusing me?" Hester hissed. "I'm saying we should sit and talk," Martha said coolly. "Captain Webb, would you permit us an informal hearing here and now? If something deeper's uncovered, the law can take it from there." Captain Dorian Webb looked more relieved than challenged. "That seems fair enough." They formed a circle at the heart of the village Apache. Elders, settlers, soldiers, and civilians, seated side by side under open sky. And there, Ivy told her story. From the death of her mother, Celeste Blake, to the slow-burning cruelty that followed. The sack over her head. The years of shame. Her father's betrayal, selling her like livestock. The peace she finally found in the desert with the Apache. "I didn't take anything from that house," Ivy said. "There was nothing to take. Hester made sure of that." "She's lying," Hester shrieked. "She stole from us money, jewelry. Now she wants to slander me, to cover her tracks." "Let's look at the evidence," Martha said evenly. She opened a small ledger. "These are Amos's financial records. The week Ivy left, there's a $500 withdrawal marked as household expense." "Explain that." "Jonathan withdrew it," Hester muttered. "I don't know what for." "That's odd," Martha said, flipping a page. "Because Vernon Hale, the bank manager, confirmed you made that withdrawal using Amos's power of attorney." She held up a second paper. "Also, here's a sales receipt from Silver City 3 days after Ivy left for jewelry, matching the heirloom pieces my mother left to Ivy." "Sold by you." Silence. "You stole from Ivy." Martha said, voice steady but tight. "Then you filed charges to cover your theft and block her inheritance." "That's not true," Hester cried, her voice cracking. "She drove me to it. I lived with that ungrateful girl for years. I deserved something. You kept her filthy hidden, unloved." Martha stood now, her voice shaking with anger. "I saw pictures of Ivy as a child. She was beautiful. You made her believe she was a monster. You broke her." Hester's mask shattered. "Yes, Yes, I hated her. I hated that Amos loved his dead wife more than he ever looked at me. I hated that his daughter had beauty. I'd never have. I hated that she was going to inherit everything while I got nothing. So yeah, she spat. I tried to destroy her, and I would have succeeded if he hadn't sold her off to these savages. The confession echoed like a gunshot. Captain Webb stood slowly. Mrs. Vaughn, I'm placing you under arrest, theft, fraud, and pending investigation, possibly murder. We'll be exhuming Amos Blake's body. As the soldiers moved to restrain her, Hester lunged at Ivy, screaming, You ruined everything. You should have stayed under that sack where you belonged, but Jalen caught her, mid-charge, holding her like she weighed nothing. She kicked and shrieked until the soldiers hauled her away, leaving only dust in her wake. Ivy stood in stunned silence. Martha approached her gently. I'm so sorry, Ivy. I should have seen it. I should have stepped in. You didn't know, Ivy said quietly. I should have. Martha's voice cracked. The estate. It's yours now. The ranch, the land, about $3,000 in the bank. I'll handle the paperwork. You'll have full access by month's end. Ivy turned to Jalen then, to the villagers gathered around her, the children clutching her hands, Senna's kind eyes, Tenoch's steady presence. Can I use it? She asked Martha. Martha blinked. Use it? It's mine, right? I can do anything with it. Martha smiled. It's yours. Do whatever your heart tells you. I want to use it to build a school, Ivy said, voice steady, here in the village. A real school with books, proper supplies, a roof that doesn't leak. A place where Apache children can learn English and white children can learn Apache. A place where they meet in the middle, not just tolerate each other, but understand each other. Martha Bell smiled warmly. That's a beautiful dream. And I'll help you make it real. 3 weeks later, Ivy Blake and Jalen stood hand in hand beneath the cottonwoods, marrying in a ceremony that blended Apache tradition with Western vows. Drums echoed softly in the canyon, and the breeze carried the scent of juniper and wild sage. Martha attended along with several white families from nearby towns, families who had heard Ivy's story and came not just out of curiosity, but respect. Her dress was white simple, stitched with Apache beadwork along the hem. Senna had helped her craft it. Her golden hair fell loose down her back, wildflowers woven through it. As she and Jalen exchanged vows, Ivy caught her reflection in a polished piece of tin, a makeshift mirror hung for ceremony. She'd avoided mirrors for years, but this time, she looked. What she saw wasn't just beautiful. It was whole. Ivy. Jalen whispered, noticing her expression. You're smiling. She nodded softly. Because I just realized. For 7 years, I believed I was too ugly to be seen. But the truth is, I was never the ugly one. She added, her voice quiet but fierce. Her soul was uglier than any face could ever be. And yours, Jalen said, kissing her forehead, is beautiful. Inside and out. 5 years passed. At the edge of the village, the school Ivy dreamed of, stood tall whitewashed walls with blue trim, smoke curling from its chimney each crisp autumn morning. Inside 40 children sat shoulder to shoulder, Apache and white, bent over their slates. Their voices mixed languages with ease, their laughter proof that peace could be taught. Ivy stood at the front, one hand resting on the curve of her belly, the other gesturing at words written in chalk. She was pregnant with their third child. Their oldest, Eli, was now 4 and helping Senna grind corn. Their daughter, Amira, 2 years old and already full of questions, napped in a cot behind the classroom wall. Teacher Ivy, one boy called, raising his hand, "How do you say brave in Apache?" She smiled and spoke the word aloud, then watched as every child, red-haired or raven-haired, echoed it in chorus. This was her dream come true. A school where children learned not to fear difference, but to celebrate it. Where 2 worlds met not as enemies, but as neighbors. That afternoon, Ivy walked home slowly, her hand pressed to her aching back. Jalen was waiting in front of their larger home, tossing pebbles with Eli. Mama Eli ran into her arms and she caught him with a soft laugh. "How was class today?" Jalen asked, kissing her forehead. "Wonderful. Tiring. The baby's been kicking all morning. She's going to be a warrior," Jalen said proudly, touching her belly. "Or he's going to be a teacher," Ivy teased. That night, with the children asleep, Ivy and Jalen sat beneath the stars. The desert was quiet, save the chirr of crickets and the soft wind brushing the trees. She leaned against him, eyes half closed. "Do you remember the first time we sat like this?" she asked. "By the river," he said, "before Hester Vaughn came with her lies. I remember everything, Ivy, including the first time I saw your face in that cave. I knew then I'd never be the same." Ivy was quiet. She thought of that frightened girl with a burlap sack over her head. The girl who thought she was unlovable, a monster. And she thought of the long, hard journey from that darkness to this moment. "I want to tell our children the truth," she said suddenly. "About what happened to me. About the sack. About the lies. All of it." Jalen was quiet for a beat. "Why?" "Because someday," she said, "someone might try to put a sack on them. Maybe not made of burlap, but of shame or judgment or fear. I want our daughter to grow up knowing she's strong and worthy. I want our sons to know how to see people beyond what the world tells them. I want them to never ever let anyone convince them to hide who they are." Jalen looked at her eyes, fierce with love. "Then we'll tell them. When they're old enough, we'll tell them how their mother survived something that should have broken her. How she came out stronger. How she took the pain and built something beautiful. This school. This family. This life." Tears slid down Ivy's cheeks. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. "For so long," she whispered, "I thought my story was just about surviving. But it's more than that. It's about becoming. Becoming who I really was, under the sack, under the lies, under the silence." She turned to him, her voice breaking gently. "You didn't just save me, Jalen. You saw me. Even when I couldn't see myself." Jalen took her hand and kissed her knuckles softly. "I saw you, Ivy, and I'll never stop seeing you." They sat under the stars, their hands entwined, the desert wind carrying the laughter of children across the valley and the soft promise of all the tomorrows still to come. Jalen had once said it plain and clear, words soft but strong spoken, without hesitation. "You were always beautiful, always brave, always someone worth loving," he'd told her. "That sack didn't hide you. It only blinded you from what the rest of us could already see." That night, with the cabin quiet and Jalen asleep inside, Ivy Blake stepped out into the moonlight alone. She walked to the rain barrel beside the porch and stared down at the reflection in the still water. A woman gazed back, golden hair catching silver light, blue eyes no longer filled with doubt. She looked older now, her face marked with laugh lines and sun-browned skin. But there was strength in that image, a woman who had been shattered and somehow pieced herself together. A woman who had come to understand that beauty had nothing to do with flawlessness. It was about truth. Her thoughts drifted back to the burlap sack, the same one left behind in a mountain cave 5 years earlier. That sack had symbolized nearly a decade of lies, of shame, of believing she was too ugly, too monstrous to be looked upon. But now she stood in a home she'd helped build with children. She taught a man who loved her, and a life shaped from resilience and grace. She'd created a space where everyone was allowed to be seen and cherished exactly as they were. The sack was long gone, and Ivy now knew what had always been buried beneath it. She'd never been invisible. She'd never been too much or too little. She had always been worthy of being seen. She had always been enough. She had always been beautiful. And now, finally, she believed it. Ivy's journey from hidden shame to open light reminds us that the deepest cages aren't always made of wood and iron. Sometimes they're built from cruel whispers and silent wounds. And real beauty, it's not in how the world sees you, but in the moment you decide you deserve to be seen. If this story stirred something in you, hit that like button. Tell us in the comments what moment moved you most. Was it when Jalen first saw her face in that cave? Or when she finally saw her own reflection without flinching? Or maybe when Hester Vaughn's cruel mask shattered in that village gathering? Don't miss our next tale. Because every story of transformation reminds us the version of you that rises from pain is often more radiant than the one who never had to fight for the light. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work.